Over the June 14th and 15th weekend, I think a lot of people were very interested to see the result of the Charlie's Collectibles Show 10K, which I guess ended up being an 11K tournament. 250 players in the US. I think there were some other big events in Europe, obviously, but we're going to focus on this one for this video. And as per the thumbnail, yes, a very interesting deck ended up taking down the whole thing. And we're going to take a look at that in just a second. What I will say is there was, I guess, a secondary event on the Sunday. So if you dropped out of the main events, maybe didn't make top cut, you had something to do on the Sunday, and I think it is worth taking a look at this smaller tournament, 108 players in the CCS 2K on the Sunday, and Noimnot with Ruby Amethyst ended up taking that down. Very happy to see that. If we have time, we'll come back and look at that tournament, but mainly we want to take a look at the big 250 player 11K. And yes, Brooms ended up taking first place, which is very interesting. We're going to be diving into that in just a second here. What's also interesting to note, no Emerald Steel and no Amber Steel, not aggro, not Steel Song, out of this top 8. Instead, you had domination in the top cut, 50% by Ruby Amethyst, oh, sorry, not Ruby Amethyst, Ruby Sapphire, 1 Ruby Amethyst in the top 8, and 2 Emerald Amethysts as well. The only Steel deck in the top 8 ended up winning the whole thing. Very interesting to see that there. Yeah, I think we're going to take a look at all of these decks. What's interesting also to note here is 1 burn and 3 item variations of Ruby Sapphire. So, even with the Hiram ban, this deck is still around and putting in some work. But let's go ahead and jump into the Brooms list here. So, this is very interesting because Yensid is undoubtedly a very strong card. The issue has always been there's just not enough good Brooms that you want to use to make him viable, right? There's definitely the 1-drop Broom, which sees a lot of play in Amethyst decks for sure. But even this Broom, the cleaner, what is it called again? Aerial Cleaner, is still good. It did see some play, mainly in like Sapphire Steel lists that were looking for a character that could have evasive to take out opposing Diablos. This card was always like okay, but never anything like, super amazing or there's just better 2-drops to play, right? But in this build, Christopher was basically saying, you know what, I'm just going to play all of the 2-drops. I'm going to play the 4 docks. I'm even playing snakes. I'm playing the Brooms, the Smees, the Yensids. That's 5 different 2-drops for a total of 8, 16, 18 2-drops. Very low to the ground package here. On the 1-drop front, we've got all of the redraw cards, right? So a total of 11 1-drops. And then on 3, again, a very hefty package. And 11, 3 foxes, 4 crabs, 4 cobras. Even more, of course, with the Pete's. So this is 12, 15 3-drops. And then just a couple of 4-drops and 6 with the 3 goats and the 3 genie. 3 fire the cannons. Interesting. I'm guessing this is, again, anti-emerald stuff. 3 friends and 4 strength as your primary form of removal. I mean, I guess along with fire the cannons. Crazy that this deck ended up taking it down, but if you've ever gone up against Yensid and if he gets going by the turn 3 when he can quest, if you do have the double Brooms in play, not only did he replace himself, but he's also questing for 3, and that is very, very powerful. To have a 2-drop 3 quester. Him being a 1/3 is also very relevant because you think about this card and you're like, well, Piglet in Amber kind of does the same thing, right? You just have to have 2 other characters. You're not restricted by the limitation of the Broom, and the Piglet quests for 3. The Piglet being a 2/2 is definitely relevant because he gets outed by a lot more things, mainly Storm, and in this case, Fire the Cannons too on this side of the deck list here. But Piglet also doesn't draw a card potentially when he comes into play, and that's huge for a deck like this. Also, not being restricted by Brooms, I mean, I guess Piglet, you could say, I mean, it's why Piglet has historically seen more play than Yensid, but it's wild to me that a deck like this could win the tournament. I would be interesting to know how often the Yensid interactions actually like procced. Like how many times did you do turn 1 Broom, turn 2 Yensid, turn 3, I don't know, another Broom and another 1-drop? Because to me that would seem like the curve that you'd want to go for, right? You just want to go as wide as possible, replace your hand as you quest with these guys, right? Quest, banish, draw a card, quest, banish, draw a card, quest until your opponent decides to banish it, draw a card, and then eventually once your hand is emptied out, you get so far ahead that you have 2 very powerful ways to close out the game in the goat cycle and the cobra, right? 4 cobras. which is a lot. But if you have a big hand or you can maintain a good hand size, the Cobra, the discard factor doesn't nearly mean as much. When you look at this list, right, the 11 1-drops and then the 4 2-drops, all of which replace themselves. The Yen Sid hopefully will replace itself. There's a lot of like progressive card draw, right? You're playing an interaction and you're getting the benefit of I get the card draw off of it as well. And that kind of, it looks like an aggro deck, but I would say this is more of a tempo deck, right? Because you're utilizing a game plan that, yes, you're playing out interactions, but you're not starving yourself of card draw. Because when you look at the amount of cards here that replace themselves, you've got 11 1-drops, these 4 2-drops, that is a total of 15. Don't know why that was hard for me to kind of calculate in my head, but sure. 19 off the Yen Sid. And then, of course, you can cycle the redraw cards with the bounce. But you're at 19, and then you go to Goat. I mean, not Goat, geez. You go to Genie. That's 22. So 22, which is a third of your deck, more or less, just over a third of your deck, are cards that redraw, right? You can kind of see where I'm going with this. In an aggro deck, you run out of gas pretty quickly. You need a way to refill your hand, right? And a deck like this is able to do that as you continue to put threats on the board. And they're very powerful threats, right? The Yen Sid questing for potentially 3 is huge. The Genie obviously questing for 2 while replacing itself is big. And then you have a little bit extra card draw in Friends if you do need to sing this, which again, you play a good number of 3 drops that you can easily sing this with. Also, keep in mind that, things like the Cobra, the Smee, the Snake, obviously the Fox, the Crab, and the Goat are all very well statted cards, and so they can be difficult to out. You drop these things down, your opponent's like, all right, like I have to deal with this, and I'm probably losing, my developed board to deal with your threats, and I just maybe can't deal with them fast enough, or as many of them as fast as I need to before you're able to just put on the pressure and win the game. So I can definitely understand how a deck like this could do very well. It's just amazing to me, or I would just want to know how often you're able to proc the Yen Sid with just these 2 brooms. I bought foil Yen Sids because I'm like, this card is crazy, and I was always expecting more good brooms to come out. It'll be interesting to see if this card and other brooms get reprinted. This was a set 4 card, right? Yeah, it was. So this will rotate out, and this is like the best broom that they got. So will Magic Broom, Illuminary Keeper be reprinted? This was earlier. This was set 3, right? Oh, no, this was also set. Wow, we got both the brooms in set 4? Okay, interesting. Yeah, do they let all of the broom stuff rotate out, or will we see the broom stuff reprinted? It's such a cool deck. Like, I think they should reprint that stuff, but obviously they're very limited in what they can reprint. But yeah, very cool deck. If anybody has any comments about the broom deck, or if the creator watches this video and wants to comment anything, I'll pin the comment. Let me know. Very cool and innovative list, and big congrats to Christopher for taking down the whole event, a big event, with a deck that was completely out of left field. Maybe not for him, but I'm sure for everybody else. Nobody had Amethyst Steel brooms on their radars, I'm sure. Zarek, I think this guy has popped up before, winning another tournament that we looked at in our previous meta report. So definitely, a I don't know if I'd say well known, but probably well known. But definitely a player who has had results in the past, at least recently. So no surprise to see them doing very well here again in this event. And we have blue-red items. We've got the Bell in blue-red, we've got the Scrooge, we've got the Tamatoa packages, and we're going all out on the Sisu. 4 Sisus and 2 B preps. 1 Hideaway, 4 Sale, of course, for Tipo, 3 Brawl. And what's crazy is, like, these lists, when they did rely on Hiram, now seem to rely on Workshop. And when you look at this list, it still does what blue-red does, right? It's still oppressive in terms of it can get out these big board wipes pretty early. Obviously, Sapphire Coil with the Sisu is like super, super strong. But what's interesting to me is when you would rely on Hiram before with the items, I haven't played enough of this deck post the Hiram ban. I did experiment with, like, my preferred list was the item list, and I was running like 2 workshops with Hiram, which you could argue wasn't needed, but I just wanted that more consistent card draw. The Scrooge McDuck, the Grammatala can fish for the workshop. I mean, there's been variations that even go back to the Queen from, I think, set 4 that can reveal the top 3 and put an item 3 cost or less into play exerted, which if it hits the workshop is tremendous value. Hard drawing the workshop here or getting it off of Scrooge or Grandma, obviously, because there's no way to play it for free, except for now you have Tamatoa Happy as a Clam. So having the workshop in your hand, questing with the Tamatoa, putting down the workshop for free, still a tremendously good and valuable interaction. It doesn't even come into play exerted. Not that it matters for a workshop, but like playing a Greatstone Dragon for free is also kind of cool. Or playing anything that's unexerted so you can proc another item for the Scrooge McDuck is interesting. Yeah, these lists, I mean, they're obviously a little combo oriented, obviously setup oriented. You need to see certain things in rotation. Like it really does rely, similar to how previous red blue relies. I don't want to say relies, that's the wrong word. It doesn't rely on workshop, but workshop is a decent sized piece to it. Like obviously shark lists and stuff don't use workshop, didn't rely on Hiram all that much, if they even did, right? Some variations wouldn't even play the Hiram, and they were very good. So like the deck is still able to function as a progressive list, right? It ramps, only to how far I'll go, which is very interesting as well. And obviously no shark, but yeah, I mean, again, I haven't played enough of this list to know how much this particular list would rely on workshop, but from what I've played against a decent amount of red blue, and like I've lost to red blue even without them hitting workshop, and it was the item list, and they didn't hit workshop, and I still just like lose because like even if they see popsicles with like these Tamatoas, like this is a redraw engine in and of itself. The big Tamatoa, the small Tamatoa, like this list really still does rely on a lot of ramping, right? The Tipo, the Sail, the how far I'll go. And it's able to maintain some semblance of card advantage through things like the Grandma, the Scrooge, etc. Obviously the popsicle redraw, and they can just like utilize a game plan because they still have efficient removal options, right? Like the Sapphire Coral coming in, the Sisu getting a +1 when it comes into out of threat. Obviously, big Sisu going 2+ for 1, and you develop a 3 questing body on board is huge. So this deck is definitely still a threat, and obviously this weekend proved that with a lot of people topping with it in the top 8 of this event. The tempo version of Emerald Amethyst. I have gone on and said I think the discard variant is stronger, but I'm happy to see that the tempo list is having success here. Very interesting, large one-drop package. Rafiki making its way back into the list. Pegasus just as the evasive quester. Sometimes this thing can get 3-4 lore early on, and in a tempo-oriented list, that's amazing value. 3 of the Flynn Rider, 3 of the Gogo Tamago. Again, if you watch my breakdown of Emerald Amethyst, which I don't think I did a dedicated video, but I definitely put together a list of like what I thought were the top decks, if you guys watched that video. And I split my list similar to this, the Tamago and the Flynn. And of course, the Ursula as well. And then 1 Snake, which is, okay, kind of random, but you see this at the right time. It bounces the right card, and that's like really good value. Yeah, the Cursed Merfolk. I'm curious as to why not 4, because it would seem like this would be your best 1-drop. The Rafiki, I can imagine is in there for the Amber Steel lists. Not checking, but it's a card that could help out the Rhino shift, because I mean, and this may not be what it's used for, but my immediate thought with the Rafiki is, the big Rhino with the resist 2, you need 3 strength to get over it. And when you look at this list, the first thing that has 3 strength or more is going to be the Fox or the Crab. And you have to hope to see Fox in order to just deal 2 damage, which isn't still great. You pay 3 ink to deal 2 damage to this Rhino. Whereas if you could get over it with the Rafiki, it only costs you 1. You lose your Rafiki, but you end up putting through 1 damage on the Rhino. And then anything else can finish it off. You can crash a Kit into it. You can crash a Gogo Tamago. You can crash anything else with 2 strength into it, and you don't need to trade a 3-cost character into the Rhino. I don't know if that's what it's used for, but to me that would make some decent sense. Of course, Crab coming in, boosting something up to 3 like a Diablo here to crash into the Rhino is also an interesting interaction. And I focus on this because, the Steel decks is what I would imagine could give the Emerald Amethyst tempo deck some trouble. But if this deck is able to execute its game plan, especially into the aggro decks, I definitely think it's stronger simply because you have the Foxes, you have the Kit Cloud Kickers, you have the Crabs, you have the Peter Pan Shadows. Like you have cards like, and I tested this many formats ago. I have videos testing against my friends showing why these bounce oriented decks are stronger into the aggro decks. Like they should 2-0 them every time. New cards come out like the new Rhino Shift package that definitely add a different dimension to these decks. And so you just make your adaptations because obviously you can't kit bounce. You don't want to run a Fox into the Rhino when you can only deal 2 damage because, it's resist 2. The only 2 damage gets through. The Rhino lives with 1 point of health left. So the Rafiki adaptation to me makes sense. Obviously, Crab has always been useful there. The Peter Pan Shadow, the Genie, the Elsa, sure, this is a standard package. It's crazy that Diablo being in the meta warrants you to run these cards. I've called, for those of you who know Yu-Gi-Oh, I've called Diablo Max C. And similar to what Max C does in Yu-Gi-Oh, Max C in Yu-Gi-Oh requires every single deck, more or less, to play 6 cards in their deck. So no matter what kind of deck you're building, you're playing 8 really, because you're also playing your 2 of Maxi in Master Duel's case. It's limited to 2. It's not unlimited with 3. It used to be, but it's now limited to 2. But you have to play 6 cards to counter Maxi on your opponent's end because that card is so powerful. If you run into that card, if somebody drops a Maxi on you, you're just like, I pass my turn usually, and I don't end up getting to play because I can't play into the Maxi because you draw cards. You don't need to know really what it does, but basically, when you special summon in Yu-Gi-Oh, if you drop a Maxi, you're able to draw cards. If I drop a Maxi on you and you're like, well, if I try to play the game and set up my combo, I'm going to special summon 5 times. That means you draw 5 cards. In Lorcana, Diablo is like, and I've said this before, your draw engine is my draw engine. If I have an exerted Diablo and you're like, well, I don't want to play, my friends on the other side and, I pull the lever to draw cards because you're going to draw cards too. So I have to have the answer to Diablo, just like I have to have the answer to Max C. And so these decks, no matter what deck you're on, essentially have to play some form of interactive removal for Diablo. In Amethyst, Emerald, you don't have Steel or Ruby removal options, so you're forced to play things like Peter Pan Shadow, Genie, which to be fair would likely see play even without Diablo in the format. I mean, we'll find out soon because Genie will survive rotation, Diablo won't, and probably doesn't get reprinted. And Elsa, which again is a good enough card in and of itself. But the Peter Pan Shadow, it's a good card, but you're definitely playing more of this because of the threat of Diablo in the meta for sure. And then aside from that, the other thing, I've talked about the pull the lever, wrong lever package. Interesting that they're only on 3 across the board on their actions here. So the only thing, obviously this player did very well. They were first after Swiss. I'd be curious as to why the kind of a little wonky ratios, like a lot of 3 ofs, not a lot of 4 ofs. Maybe in a list like this, it works very well. But yeah, 1 Cricky, if you see it, you see it. If you don't, you don't. 2 of the Ursula, which I think is fine. This card remains very, very strong. In a deck like this, I think it works a lot better than in Ruby Amethyst. I've tested this not a lot, but I tested this a decent amount in Ruby Amethyst, and it just doesn't seem to gel well, which is strange because you would think it would. But in a list like this, it definitely does a lot better because it's more tempo aggro oriented, whereas Ruby Amethyst is more control oriented, which again is crazy because this is like inherently you read this and this seems like a control card, right? I put this down, I'm starting to control the game. Nobody else can sing except for her. And then I can start exerting characters so I can start controlling the game more. But it being a 3 questing 4/7 body, like lends itself better, I think, to aggressive strategies. I could be wrong on that, but like that's just my observation from playing it the limited amount of time that I have played it in Ruby Amethyst. And I have played it in this deck too, last format, and it did do well. And then, yeah, 3 pull the lever. I would think normally you'd want to go, well, I guess, no, this makes sense. Because normally if you're playing like a discard list with Diablo in it, this card has extra value because you can discard it right away for the Diablo, which immediately turns your wrong lever into the best removal in the game, which I've said before, right? Like if you discard this off the Diablo shift, and then you're able to whether you probably don't need to play it on turn 3, but you have this card in reserve and you're like, as soon as you drop a big threat, Maui Shark, whatever, wrong lever it to the bottom of your deck. I don't even have to waste a turn trying to play out the pull the lever, which, playing this card out isn't necessarily bad, but it's slow, right? It's an action. You have to pay 3 ink. You have to take, potentially a turn off to play this, or alter your turn, play like a lower drop character in order to set up your wrong lever. But being able to discard this card off the Diablo, just to make your wrong lever live for the removal to the bottom of the deck is really, really strong. So, just using this for the bounce, for the tempo gain, or if you do happen to get it off of the pull the lever to put the card to the bottom of the deck, I think either or is fine. That would be my take, because again, as a tempo-oriented deck, you're trying to dictate the pace. You're saying I just need to slow you down a little bit and I execute my game plan, I should win the game every time, right? So that makes sense. Cool list. Definitely Big props to Thomas for first after Swiss and coming in top 4. And hey, another top 4 list here. Let's see how this one differentiates itself from Thomas's. All right, we've got 14 1-drops. No Flynn Rider, instead opting for Diablo Spiteful Raven. I wonder how much of a difference that made for them. I mean, they both came top 4. But yeah, the Tamago, the Spiteful Raven, and the Ursula. So I think less 2-drops overall. I can't believe I just looked at the list and I don't even remember how many 2-drops. But, 12 is still good. Only one Peter Pan Shadow Finder, which is, again, very interesting. 2 White Rose instead. And no friends, just pull the lever, wrong lever. 4 and 2, which is very interesting. 1 Ursula Sea Witch Queen, and a much more solid 444 across the board on the Genie, Merlin, Goat, and Elsa packages. So yeah, very interesting. Not as many Peter Pan Shadows, instead opting for the Spiteful Raven and the Tamagos to do the heavy lifting against Diablo potentially. But the Tamago is definitely like very good. I think people are really sleeping on this card. It's very good. I mean, I know it's really declined in price lately, or it's been going back up somehow, or at least the foils came down in price. The foils were like $10. Do they have the price charting for the foils? They do. Oh, it has been going up. What? I thought, maybe it came down and then it went back up. Regardless, this card is very good. And it's going to survive rotation. If you're playing Emerald, I think you definitely want to make sure you're playing Tamago. It's, evasive. Even just coming down as a 2/2/2 with evasive is really good, but the ability is just like insanely strong. Okay, so the back button just doesn't seem to want to work. I just want to go back to this list here. 10 uninkables total. Okay, only 11 2-drops, so even less 2-drops than the other list. So, yeah, your uninkables are in the Genie and the Peter Pan Shadow and the Merfolk. So 6, 10. And we go to Dan's list. 4, how many uninkables? 9. 4, 4, and then 1. Yep. I would say I'm more inclined to like Dan's list, but that's just because I like 4-ofs. Like if I'm playing a card that's not a tech option, like this Ursula Sea Witch Queen, I want to see it. And so playing 4-ofs, which, is not necessarily like a mandatory rule. Like I think you need flexibility. If you're playing a more toolbox oriented list where you're like, I want to see Cursed Merfolk, but I don't want to see it like later on in the game. I want to see Rafiki, but I don't want to see it later on in the game. Like you could run a little, altered ratios. The issue is if you don't see this when you would want to see it, and then you do draw it later on in the game because it's a 2-of, you're like, I didn't see it when I want to see it, and I see it when I don't want to see it. And now it's like doesn't serve its purpose. That's always been my philosophy. And you guys, if you've played Lorcana, obviously, like if you open up your hand and you mulligan and you don't find your 1-drops and you play 8 of them and you're like, okay, it's really bad. I'm going to miss my 1-drop potentially. Potentially, I know always, but like usually it's like, yeah, I do want to play a 1-drop on turn 1 and I missed that. But then you're like, in the back of your head, probably, you're like, now this means I'm probably going to draw into my 1-drops when I don't want to see them. And this is why it's important now that we play 1-drops that actually have, good abilities. So, seeing these cards in the later part of the game aren't necessarily bad. I mean, technically the Rafiki isn't necessarily the worst either. I've talked about Hook, the 1/2 Steel Challenger 2, being a card that even if you see it in the late game can potentially do work because the 3 strength stat line that it gets when it's challenging is actually decent to slow decks down. But in a tempo-oriented deck, you see this late in the game, it's probably ink 90% of the time. So, okay. All right, well, we spent a lot of time looking at the first 4. Good old Jonathan Williams, Dragon John's here, always making top 8. You're going to win one day, man. I know it. I know you will. His item-oriented list looks very similar, again, to Zarek's. down to the same ratios of like 2 B preps, still with the 4 Sisus, 2 of the small Sisus instead of 3, the extra Maui Hero to all, I believe, the extra How Far I'll Go, 1 less Tamatoa, an extra Stone Dragon, Maui Fish Hook in here. So pretty interesting, 15 uninkables overall. Glad to see that they're having success, but at this point, these lists are pretty solidified. Interesting that there's 3 Vitalispheres. Like, in my opinion, with Red Blue, because I always played with Vitalispheres too. Like, you see this card without the workshop, I imagine it seems pretty underwhelming, right? I mean, that's how it felt for me whenever I would see this without the workshop. When you see it with the workshop, though, you're just like, that's fine. And when you see Popsicle with the workshop, you feel amazing. You're just like, yeah, draw 2 for 2? That's insane. And then, of course, playing items for free with the Tamatoa is insanely good value. Like playing a coil, anything like, even playing a 1-drop item off of the Tamatoa is fine. But like, you quest with this thing and you play a coil or a Stone Dragon or anything that costs 2 or more, you feel really good, especially when you like play it for free and then proc 1 or 2 workshops if I want to draw more cards. Absolutely crazy. Yeah, these last couple of lists will probably go pretty fast. So if you're still with me, yep, the Shark list, right, or DKP, Ruby Sapphire. I think this player ended up top decking a Super Goof, and he had a Super Goof in hand to win a game that he was going to lose. I think I tuned into the stream right when that happened. I watched it for like 3 minutes, and then I had to, go do something. So yeah, really, really interesting that, Super Goof is coming back into this list, because this was the list, I think, the first iteration that DKP won Melbourne DLC with. He was on Super Goofs, and then I don't think since then it's really been in the deck until it's recently come back in. Yeah, Super Goof is a great card. I think it gets rotated out, right? It's set 4. Yeah, it's unfortunate because this card is... I think this card really never got the love it deserved. It's, I mean, to be fair, we needed strength boosting stuff for it to make it like really viable outside of like these kind of shells, but it's pretty good. How many uninkables? 10 uninkables. Yeah, I've talked about Hades coming back into these kind of lists. I think actually DKP in the LCCC talked about Hades because I think he was on them there as well. Just more efficient removal. This card likely coming down on 6 or sooner, right? Because of the ramp. Well, probably turn 5 if you get the How Far I'll Go as well. Really, really efficient removal. A 2 questing big body that can also sing a B prep, right? Sing B prep with this and then set up McDuck Manor on the follow up. You don't even need to hit 11 ink to go B prep McDuck Manor. Like, this interaction is kind of insane that you can do that. It is a lot of uninkables, high cost uninkables, but again, when you're on a ramp list, you get there, and it's not really that big of a deal. Like 10 uninkables is nothing in a deck. Not nothing, but it's less impactful. Yeah, I mean, I think I told you guys, if you watch one of my previous videos, I know I played a match online and somebody hit me with like 3 back-to-back Hades, and I was just like, yeah, I guess I just lose the game. I wasn't expecting it. I played one threat knowing like, yeah, he probably has a Hades. He outs it, and then I'm like, okay, now I can develop my bigger threat, and then he outs it, and then I'm like, okay, like, no, be prepared. He used up 2 Hades. Let me put up my real like big threat on board. Then he outs it again. I was like, okay, I just lose the game. Yeah, definitely a card that can swing the game in your favor quite heavily. Yeah, I mean, if you played against Blurple or you play Blurple, you also know the power of Hades and how effective it can be, especially when you start dropping one after the other once you've kind of grinded out that mid game. Same kind of concept here, right? You start dropping these things, you put a lot of pressure on your opponent. You out a threat, you got a 2 questing body on board. It's very, very good. We'll see if he gets reprinted. I think he kind of has to, because he's one of Blue's only effective removal options. You take Hades away, Blue basically is just a red shell at that point. So I think they have to reprint that Hades, but we'll see. Yeah, 2 Let It Goes, 4 How Far I'll Go is pretty standard list. Only 2 brawls. There are lists that don't even run brawl, but it's an interesting that you would risk to play this in a discard oriented meta, because I think this list in particular suffers. I guess you could say that the items list suffers less into the discard meta. It's really a race, right, to see if you get your workshop online first. 4 workshop and 3 queen. What's funny is I think I like this list better, but obviously it's much more prone to disruption. But it's seemingly just right off the bat, because when I played the items variations of Ruby Sapphire, I did try the queen. And, just proccing her once and getting a big item into play is really nice. there's no way you're not playing the 4 Tamatoa. Did you just not have it? If that's the reason why you play the queen instead, I would say that that's, in my opinion, I would prefer the Tamatoa. But, you know, to try to fit in the queen and the Tamatoa might be kind of tough. I wonder if they opted for the queen because they didn't have Tamatoas, happy as a clam. Or if this was like a conscious choice to say I want to play the queen instead. There's no way though, right? Like you cannot be playing this many 1-drop items and not be like, you know, especially the Popsicle and the Vitalisphere, which are instant value back off of the Tamatoa. I'd be interesting to know if this was a conscious decision. Like you just like, I'm not playing happy as a clam. So in my variations, I did opt for the queen and the happy as a clam, and I opted not to play Maui's. But again, that was before Amber Steel aggro was like all over the place. I mean, you can argue you don't need it, right? If you're on B preps and Sisus. 4 coils, even an ice block. I mean, I like this list. I think out of all the lists, if I was going to play one, this one seems to be the most interesting. I would just find a way to fit Happy as a Clam in there. But again, that's probably biased because this is similar to a list that I played before. Maui, I mean, the fish hook, if you don't play Maui's, you probably don't play fish hook. But I mean, you know, it's still a good card. It boosts up the Sisu, makes it able to trade into high cost evasive threats, mainly Genie. Obviously Diablo and stuff too, but you have other answers for Diablo. And like the workshop, if you get the workshop online, I mean, even if you get into top deck mode, like the you're not even playing Grammatalist, never mind. The Scrooge McDuck coming in, getting an item, as long as you have a workshop in rotation, like you play like critical mass of items that you're going to see it anyways. You're going to see items to draw. And then that's why you have to make sure you take care of those Diablos, because you can't be drawing cards if they discard your hand if they have a Diablo up, right? That's a 2-pronged punch. Discard is poison. Top 16, okay. Anyways, we need to wrap up this video because we're probably over 30 minutes by now. The Ruby Amethyst list that ends up making... Guys, if members of the channel are still watching this video, I talked about this as a tech option that I was testing out, right? It's interesting to me to see that. Yeah, if you know, you know. Like this card is quite interesting. If you're a member of the channel and you saw the 8.2 deck list where I broke down using this Elsa and you know the reasons why you would use this, very interesting. Only 2 genies, which is interesting. 1 rabbit, okay. And I think this is fine if you're running an alternative draw engine. Like I talked about library being a little slow for me, but obviously if you're running this 1-drop package with the library, it still does, you know, Ed already showcased how strong this engine is in the North American Championships from last set, and it's still relevant for future metagames like what we are in right now. 2 Madame Medusa, this card definitely very good in the meta. It just hurts to play it, you know, a 6 cost on Inkable when you're already playing B preps, because you have to play B preps basically. No Hades or anything in this list. And then it's wild that you're playing a spellbook too, but whatever works. Going back to the OG. I've thought about this card on and off. I've never actually put it back into my deck though to test it, but like obviously if you were around in set 2, it was basically whoever saw spellbook first, and you do usually play 1 or 2 spellbooks because there was a lot of mirror matches and you were just dying to see the spellbook first. Because whoever saw the spellbook first would just put a timer on the game and just likely win it from there. But like I would argue that, you know, this is a set 2 card. Have locations, power creep, spellbook, right? I mean, you're on both here, but like this location just passively gets you the 1 lore, and it has another ability. Where a spellbook, you have to lose tempo, pay 1 ink in order to gain the lore. But to be fair, this can be challenged, right? This cannot. So if there's not a lot of item hate in the meta, like spellbook sticks, then you just have guaranteed 1 lore gain every turn. And 3 Pirate's Life with no Maui. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Maui Half Shrug, of course. I was going to say, I was like, how are you playing this with no Half Shrug? But yeah. What's interesting to me is I would definitely say Finders Keepers is going to become, I mean, obviously with rotation, but even now with all 8 sets in the metagame, I think Finders Keepers is the way that you want to play Ruby Amethyst. Finders Keepers also helps feed the Elsa. Again, you can argue, you know, you've got Genie, you got 1 rabbit, Maui Shark also is card advantage, and Recurring Friends right? Even though you probably want to recur Pirate's Life if you can, but recurring Friends to draw more cards. Like some of the more aggressive draw engines in Ruby Amethyst now, like I outlined a case in my 8.2 video where I think I drew like 9 cards over the course of 2 turns with like a Finders Keepers, Friends, Hades or something. So I did some kind of combination of those cards, and I went from like 2 or something cards in hand to like I drew 9, and I was like, yeah, I just like win the game at that point. And why that matters is because this card needs you to discard, and you want to be able to draw a lot of cards to make this card live, and you definitely can do that with like the new Hades, the Finders Keepers, the Friends, etc. The card draw engines that Amethyst plays. I think this Elsa is kind of underrated. It is very. I don't want to say very strong, but in my testing when I started to use it, and I'm not going to spoil it because the members of the video the members of the channel, sorry, who watched that video when we talked about this, it's in the thumbnail I think even of the video. You know what I mean when I say, that Elsa can put in the work. So anyways, that was the top 8 of the big 11K. Let me know if you made it this far, what you think. I do want to take a look at Neumnot's list. I've talked about Neumnot being like, obviously, you don't need me to say it. It's been around in the community ever since day one. Always been a Ruby Amethyst player, more or less, I think. He's obviously played other decks and had success with other decks. Very smart player. One of the best, if not the best Ruby Amethyst player I've said in the past. I know Ed's up there as well. At least in North America, to be fair. But always interested to see what he's on. Only one 2-drop, or I should 4, only one character 2-drop in Ursula Mad Sea Witch. No other 2-drops, 4 of it. So your only 2-drop option is this card, which means you're potentially missing a 2-drop. And only 12 1 to 2 drops. There's been a lot of theory put into practice a little bit with Ruby Amethyst, I will say. People went to 6 1-drops. People were like, you can't even do that. You need to play 10 1-drops. I play 8 1-drops, sometimes 12, right? Depends on how you're curating your deck. You can see here that Neumnot is on the library, so playing these 1-drops makes sense. And you're on this Sea Witch Queen, Mad Sea Witch, but you're not on the Sea Witch Queen, the big shift package. And I talked about that, I think, in the Emerald Amethyst portion, right? Where I said I've tested this card, the big shift, which is a very good card in Ruby Amethyst, and I just can't get it to click and work the way I want it to. And it's interesting that, that Neumnot is playing this card without the big shift. I'd be curious if he also experienced the same thing, if he tested the shift and he's like, it's just too hard to set up to get off, and even when I get it off, it doesn't do what I want it to do. Or it's its abilities on restricting singing and tapping characters down is just very limited. And obviously, from what I just discussed with the new Elsa, like, does that card just do what I want the Ursula to do more effectively, right? And therefore, the big Ursula is really just a big quester, which I don't necessarily need. That also helps to prevent singing, which how valuable is that if I can tap down more effectively, more efficiently earlier on in the game rather than relying on a shift. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics to consider there, but no evasive 2-drop, no Queen of Hearts, nothing like that. Just on the Challenger 1-3, right? So Prince Eric, the OG from Steel. 3 Madam M Fox. Again, if members of the channel, we've talked about 3 to 4 Foxes in these lists already, so interesting to see he's on 3. 4 Crabs, 4 Shadow, 4 Genie, and 2 Iago. Also 2 Maui. I personally have cut Maui from my list, but this is the exact same ratio I run. I cut the Mauis, I put in an extra Iago because my philosophy is I'm always playing Peter Pan Shadow, right? Like I can't do it. It's not inkable, so I have to play it. And therefore, I just, Iago kind of operates as my Maui to a certain degree. It can quest and it's evasive, so it challenges with evasives. It should have rush thanks to the Peter Pan Shadow. Obviously, you don't want to rely on that because it's not a reliable, I have the Shadow on board, it lived, and then I play the Iago. Iago is a lot of times going to come in and not have rush. That's fine. But the evasive ability, the ability to quest, and yes, the susceptibility with Vanish hurts, but Iago, I talked about it in the 8.2 video. For me, whenever I play the Iago, it gets me a lot of value. Like I just noticed that. And yeah, there are times where it gets instantly outed and things like that. But again, you play smart, you play strategically. You're like, I'm only playing this when I can get value off of it right away with the Peter Pan Shadow. Otherwise, I'm inking it in certain matchups, like let's say the Blurple match or whatever decks you're going up against that you know they have no interaction with the Iago. You drop this on the board, it's instantly a big character that threatens, going 2 or 3 for 1 against your opponent's stuff. The Elsa, 4 of, very good. No teched 4-drop Elsa, that's fine. I think people still need to experiment with that. 4 of the Maui Shark and 1 of the Hades. I recently come back on Hades. I'm on 2. The Hades is definitely an interesting option. Obviously, as a 1 of, it's more of a tech option, I would say, in this list. But the reason I would say this card, from testing is relevant is because if you're able to, and I talk about this in the 8.2 deck list, if you're able to stabilize, mainly into your worst matchup, which is discard, and Noimnot did have a match on stream where I think he got 2-0'd on the play, both games. He was on the play, and he got 2-0'd by Emerald Steel discard, just going to show you how oppressive discard is against this deck. But if you're able to stabilize against the discard decks, the Hades into your later part of the game just kind of secures the game for you a little bit, because you drop this. They don't really have a way to out this effectively because they probably don't have enough characters to double Sing Strength or even single Sing Strength. The other steel removal doesn't really do it. They're not really on Zeus. And Zeus doesn't out this entirely either by itself. The Brunos can out it, obviously, but the Bruno bouncing it back to hand, like when you play this, you drew 2 cards. So like the Bruno bouncing it back isn't a guaranteed discard even. But then you being able to quest with this and draw another 2 or just replay it and draw another 2, like you can likely start to outdraw the discard game plan. And as long as they haven't run far enough away with the game, the Hades can definitely secure you the dub against the discard decks. If they're not able to discard your whole hand and shut you down by like turn 5, which is arguably what they try to do every game, you're able to contest their board. You're able to shut down the Diablo. Like, yeah, they can redraw off Prince John and do everything because you can't interact with Prince John until you get the B prep. But then the Hades coming in and then just being like, yeah, I'm just going to draw more cards than you can discard. And this is also another reason why, again, I talked about in the previous list, and again, Noimnot seems to be on it here, why you play Finders Keepers. Finders Keepers, especially with the Shark, is just absolutely insane. You just end up going off the rails in terms of card draw potentially, and the discard decks just can't do anything against you. Like, again, you have to get there. But if you're able to push through and get there, like the discard decks, I would say have like no play. Like their primary game plan to shut you down just doesn't work. They have to try to race you at that point. And like I said, unless they were able to, really get to like 14, 16 lore, by the time you start clawing your way back into the game, they should have no chance to win the game. And then to further secure that point, Noimnot is also on 3 Pirates' Lives, which again, I've talked about playing anywhere from 1 to 3 or even, sometimes cutting it to 0. But this card definitely has really good value in a lot of matchups as well. Very interesting list. I am a fan. I will say the only thing I'm not a fan of is maybe just the singular 2-drop card. But, Noimnot, definitely one of the godfathers of Ruby Amethyst. So we'd never question the decisions and, obviously proven his caliber of play, winning the secondary event here. So really, really good stuff. Beating out Emerald Amethyst Bounce, which, yep, looks pretty straightforward from what we've seen in the main event, getting top 4. And then an aggro list making top 4 as well. And Dan Exor, a very well-known Blurple player, on some of the spicy stuff with the key to 4-drop, the Peter Pan, or not Peter Pan, sorry, no Peter Pan, but on the Iagos. 3 Hades, 1 Elsa, and the Radigans, right? This card, only 2 Finders Keepers, which is very interesting. But yeah, I've talked about this card kind of being overlooked a little bit. I think it's a pretty good card. And I think he's on a Lucky Dime. Is he? Yeah, he's on a Lucky Dime. Lucky Dime being played for free off Tamatoa here is kind of crazy. Comes out of nowhere. You would never expect that in Blurple, right? This card, though, man, not being able to interact with this Radigan is just crazy. But yeah, it's definitely, like, you got some good dime targets in here, mainly the Radigan and the Elsa. Obviously, this Elsa is also, like, when it comes down, it's annoying. You don't really see it these days, but pretty cool. Musa's songs. Oh, we got to take, like, man, we got to wrap up this video. Oh my God, it's going too long. I do want to take a look at this aggro list. This is not, this, yeah, I looked at this. Did I look at this earlier? Yeah, he's on songs. This is more Amber Steel song, dude. I don't know if I mean, this is aggro song. It's a combination of both decks. Very interesting. I mean, not much else to say here. How many uninkables? 18 uninkables. Holy moly. On the Calhoons and the docks. Yeah, it's a lot of uninkables. But it worked. Top 4, right? And we definitely got to take a look at blue-green here. Wow. On the Peter Pan. One of. And yeah, this Basil bouncing and discarding. Yeah, I think I have a blue-green list similar to this. Again, if you watch my friend and I's test match where he was on the Lady Tremaine with a down in New Orleans, I mean, not playing down in New Orleans in this build, obviously, but yeah, there's some crazy stuff. This Lady Tremaine in blue-green can do a lot of work. But the goal of this list, like it has a primary game plan, right? Which is bounce all of your stuff, play their Clarabelle, and then draw cards because they bounce all your stuff back to your hand. So you probably have like a big hand. Then they Clarabelle, they draw like 8 cards, and then they bend to your will you. So like you can't replay your stuff fast enough before the bend to the will just annihilates your board. So similar to what like Under the Sea does in the Amber Emerald discard deck, right? Where they discard your hand and then they out your board with the Under the Sea. So they put you on no cards in hand, no cards on the board. This deck just aims to bounce all your stuff off the board, put it all into your hand, play the Clarabelle, they draw, X amount of cards, which is usually going to be a large amount, and then they play Bend to My Will on the follow-up. And then you're left with no hand, you're left with a very minimal, if like nothing board, and then they just mop up the game from there. Very effective game plan, surprisingly. I've definitely been cooked by this deck before, and it's like I can't do anything against it sometimes. Okay, if you're still with me, congrats, but we're going to wrap it up there. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of this event. How cool was it? Thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.